I think when we look back, it'd be hard to find a more harebrained decision in the history of modern education than to do that. We have sent such a clear...
Mike Rowe just broke his silence, and what he revealed moments ago has left millions of fans in absolute shock. The man who spent 2 decades crawling through sewers, handling deadly animals, and celebrating America's hardest workers just made an admission that changes everything. This isn't about another season of dirty jobs or a new project. This is deeply personal, and it explains years of whispers, health concerns, and questions about his future. For someone who built his entire career on honesty and grit, what Mike just confessed hits harder than anyone expected. The announcement affects not just his television legacy, but the foundation that has distributed millions in scholarships, the workers who saw him as their voice, and the mission he's fought for his entire life. If you've ever watched Dirty Jobs, supported skilled trades, or simply respected Mike's no-nonsense approach to life, what you're about to hear will catch you completely off guard. This is the breaking news that's currently exploding across social media, and we're covering every detail right now. Before we dive into what Mike just revealed, you need to understand where this all started. Baltimore, Maryland, in the early 1960s. Mike Rowe wasn't born into television or destined for fame. He was a kid who loved theater, music, and performance. His deep, commanding voice that would later become iconic was first developed in high school speech competitions and local productions. But the real foundation of his character came from his grandfather, a skilled tradesman who could build or fix anything with his hands. While other kids idolized athletes or movie stars, young Mike watched his grandfather work and saw something different. He saw dignity in labor, pride in craftsmanship, and the quiet satisfaction of a job well done. This childhood observation would eventually become the driving philosophy of his entire career. After graduating from Towson University with a communication degree, Mike did something completely unexpected. He became an opera singer, performing with the Baltimore Opera and using that powerful baritone in concert halls. It seemed like he was headed for a career in the arts, far removed from the muddy trenches and dangerous work sites he'd later become famous for. But Mike felt something was missing. He wanted to connect with real people, tell real stories, and escape the pretentiousness he sometimes felt in the performance world. His break into television came through voice work, narration gigs, and eventually a hosting position on QVC, the home shopping network. Selling random products to insomniacs at 3 in the morning might not sound glamorous, but it taught him something invaluable: how to think on his feet, engage an audience, and make any subject interesting. Those skills would prove essential when Discovery Channel came calling with an idea for a show about America's dirtiest jobs. They needed someone who could handle the filth with humor, respect the workers without condescension, and make the whole thing watchable. Mike didn't just fit the role, he transformed it into something nobody predicted. But before he became that cultural icon, he was just a Baltimore kid who never forgot where he came from. And that authenticity would soon change television forever. The question is, can that same authenticity survive what he just admitted today? When Dirty Jobs premiered in 2003, television executives were skeptical. A show about sewage workers, garbage collectors, and pig farmers. Who would watch that? But Mike Rowe proved everyone wrong within the first few episodes. The concept was simple: travel across America and step into the jobs nobody wants to talk about at dinner parties. But Mike's execution made it brilliant. He didn't observe from a safe distance with a microphone and clean clothes. He stripped down, put on the work gear, and dove headfirst into every disgusting, dangerous, back-breaking task alongside the people who did it every day. Whether it was castrating sheep, cleaning out septic tanks, or handling venomous snakes, Mike approached each job with genuine curiosity and self-deprecating humor. Viewers weren't just entertained by the shock value. They were moved by the respect he showed these workers. For the first time, a mainstream television show was treating garbage collectors like the essential workers they are, not as punchlines or background extras. Mike asked the questions that mattered. How did you get into this work? What keeps you going? What happens if nobody wants to do this anymore? Those questions hit a nerve in American culture. The show became a phenomenon, running for 8 seasons and spawning countless specials and spin-offs. Ratings soared because people saw something authentic in a television landscape dominated by manufactured drama and celebrity nonsense. Mike gave dignity to jobs that society had deemed undignified, and in doing so, he started a conversation that's still happening today. Dirty Jobs wasn't just entertainment, it was a mirror held up to America, showing the backbone that keeps everything running. But success came with a cost, and the physical toll of years in hazardous conditions was already starting to add up in ways Mike kept hidden from cameras. When Dirty Jobs ended its original run, many assumed Mike would fade into comfortable retirement, maybe do some voice work, enjoy the residuals, and call it a career. Instead, he doubled down on his mission. Everything he witnessed while filming, the aging workforce, the shortage of young people entering skilled trades, the societal pressure pushing everyone toward 4-year degrees, it lit a fire in him that wouldn't go out. In 2008, Mike launched the Rowe Works Foundation with a clear and controversial mission: challenge the stigma around blue-collar work and provide scholarships for people pursuing careers in the skilled trades. At a time when guidance counselors were telling every high school student that college was the only path to success, Mike stood up and said what few mainstream figures dared to say. America desperately needs welders, electricians, plumbers, and mechanics just as much as it needs lawyers and accountants. He argued that a 4-year degree isn't the right choice for everyone, and that pushing every student toward college was creating a skills gap that threatened the nation's infrastructure. Through the foundation, millions of dollars have been distributed to students entering trade schools, apprenticeships, and vocational programs. Mike used his platform relentlessly, appearing before Congress, writing op-eds, and giving speeches that challenged the educational establishment. His message was consistent and blunt. We've made a terrible mistake by devaluing the trades, and we're paying for it with crumbling infrastructure, unfilled jobs, and young people drowning in student debt for degrees that don't guarantee employment. He also created Returning the Favor, a Facebook series that highlighted ordinary Americans doing extraordinary things in their communities. The show drew millions of views and reinforced Mike's reputation as someone who genuinely cared about working people, not just as content, but as human beings deserving respect. He launched the Way I Heard It podcast, short-form storytelling in the style of Paul Harvey that connected history's forgotten figures to modern lessons about work and perseverance. Every project, every speech, every post carried the same theme: hard work matters, and the people who do it deserve our gratitude and support. But carrying that mission alone for over a decade came with a weight that few people saw, and that burden is central to what Mike just revealed. As the years passed, Mike Rowe evolved from a television personality into something much more significant. He became a cultural philosopher, a voice of reason in an America that felt increasingly fractured and angry. While cable news screamed partisan talking points and social media amplified outrage, Mike carved out a space where common sense still had value. His Facebook posts became legendary, shared by millions because they cut through the noise with clarity, humor, and wisdom. He would take simple, everyday observations, fixing a broken appliance, watching birds build a nest, remembering a lesson from his grandfather, and turn them into reflections on responsibility, gratitude, and the meaning of success. Unlike the endless parade of talking heads trying to inflame division, Mike spoke like a neighbor having a conversation over the fence. He didn't preach or condescend. He shared stories, asked questions, and reminded people of values that seemed to be disappearing: personal responsibility, respect for work, gratitude for the people who keep society running. His refusal to align with any political party made him a rare figure in modern media. Conservatives loved his emphasis on hard work and self-reliance. Liberals appreciated his criticism of corporations that exploited workers and his advocacy for fair wages. But Mike rejected being claimed by either side. He insisted that common sense wasn't partisan, and that the real divide in America wasn't left versus right. It was between people who understood the value of work and people who had forgotten it. His podcast continued this approach, telling stories that transcended ideology and reminded listeners of shared humanity. When the pandemic hit and the country faced unprecedented challenges, Mike's voice became even more important. He reminded everyone that while the rest of America worked from home in pajamas, millions of essential workers, truckers, grocery clerks, electricians, sanitation workers, kept everything running without the luxury of Zoom calls. His credibility came from years of actually doing those jobs alongside real workers, and that authenticity made people trust him in ways they no longer trusted politicians or media figures. But being that voice of reason for an entire nation takes a toll that nobody sees. And that pressure is at the heart of what Mike just admitted to the world. For all his success and influence, Mike's life hasn't been without struggle. Behind the calm, authoritative voice and the easy humor, there were challenges that most fans never saw. The physical toll of dirty jobs was no joke. Crawling through toxic sewers, handling hazardous materials, working in extreme temperatures, and exposing himself to dangerous conditions for television entertainment left lasting damage. Mike has spoken occasionally about chronic back pain, lingering injuries, and exhaustion that followed those grueling filming schedules. But he rarely complained, always redirecting attention to the workers who dealt with those conditions every single day without the luxury of a production crew or a paycheck from Discovery Channel. While many assumed a successful TV host must be fabulously wealthy, Mike often reminded people that his fortune wasn't nearly as vast as tabloids claimed. He poured significant earnings into his foundation and advocacy work, sometimes at personal cost. Unlike celebrities who built empires through endorsements and branding, Mike frequently turned down opportunities that felt inauthentic or exploitative. His integrity mattered more than money, but that principled approach came with sacrifices. There was also his personal life, or rather, the lack of one. Mike chose to remain unmarried with no children, a decision that raised questions in interviews and gossip columns. He often deflected with humor, joking that he was married to his work or too busy traveling to settle down. But people close to him suggested that the isolation weighed on him more than he admitted publicly. Carrying the responsibility of an entire movement on your shoulders while living a relatively solitary life creates a unique kind of loneliness. And all of these struggles, physical, emotional, financial, personal, have been building for years, leading directly to the bombshell announcement he just made. Then it happened. Just minutes ago, Mike Rowe stepped forward and made an admission that sent shockwaves through his fan base and the industry. In a carefully worded but clearly emotional statement, he revealed that he's stepping away from much of his public work to confront challenges that can no longer be ignored. For years, speculation swirled about his health, his future, and whether the relentless pace of advocacy and media appearances was sustainable. Today, Mike confirmed what many feared but few wanted to believe. The decades spent in hazardous environments and under constant pressure have caught up with him. While he didn't provide every medical detail, Mike acknowledged that doctors have strongly advised him to slow down, to prioritize his well-being over the mission that has consumed his life. For a man who spent 20 years crawling through filth with a smile and making it look effortless, hearing him admit vulnerability was jarring. But the announcement went deeper than physical health. Mike also opened up about the emotional exhaustion of being expected to always have the answer, to always be the voice of reason in an unreasonable world. He admitted that the weight of carrying this advocacy mission largely alone for over a decade had become unsustainable. He spoke about feeling like he was shouting into a void, trying desperately to remind America of its backbone while watching institutions continue to ignore the skilled workers he fought so hard to honor. The frustration in his words was palpable. And then came the part that hit hardest. Mike revealed that the Mike Rowe Works Foundation, the organization that has funded countless scholarships and reshaped conversations about work in America, will be undergoing a leadership transition. While the foundation won't disappear, Mike explained that he's passing primary responsibility to others so he can step back and focus on his personal health and life. For an organization so closely tied to his name and mission, this marked the end of an era. Mike framed the announcement not as a farewell, but as an inevitable shift. He promised his voice would still be heard, perhaps through his podcast, occasional projects, or smaller public appearances, but he was brutally honest. He cannot continue at this pace without sacrificing his future. The statement was quintessentially Mike, honest, humble, and tinged with the self-deprecating humor that made him beloved. He joked that Dirty Jobs was always a love letter to work, not to him, and that the jobs would go on without him. But beneath the humor, the message was clear. Mike Rowe is human. He's hurting, and he needs to rest. The reaction to Mike's announcement was immediate and overwhelming. Within minutes, social media platforms exploded with emotion. Fans who had followed him since the earliest days of Dirty Jobs poured out gratitude, heartbreak, and disbelief. For millions of people, Mike wasn't just a TV host. He was a mentor from afar, a voice that validated their own struggles and gave dignity to their work. Truck drivers wrote about listening to his podcast during lonely overnight hauls, saying his words kept them company when nothing else could. Welders, electricians, plumbers, and construction workers shared memories of watching Dirty Jobs with their kids and pointing at the screen with pride, saying, "That's what I do. That's why it matters." Former colleagues and workers who appeared on Dirty Jobs posted old photos and behind-the-scenes stories, thanking Mike for putting their professions on the map. One Alaskan crab fisherman wrote, "Without Mike, nobody would have understood what we go through out here. He made America care, and I'll never forget it." The television industry was equally shaken. Executives who once doubted that a show about septic tanks could succeed admitted that Mike had permanently changed the rules of storytelling. Producers called his departure the end of an era in reality television, a time when real work, not manufactured drama, could captivate audiences. Scholars and labor advocates weighed in on the cultural void his reduced presence would create. One columnist wrote, "Mike Rowe wasn't just a TV host. He was America's blue-collar philosopher, and people trusted him in ways they no longer trust leaders." But not everyone was purely sentimental. Some critics pointed out that his departure highlighted a deeper systemic problem: the nation's ongoing neglect of skilled trades. If Mike Rowe can't keep this fight going, one commentator argued, then maybe the rest of us need to wake up and take his place, because the skills gap isn't disappearing. Even celebrities chimed in, with actors, musicians, and fellow hosts praising Mike as one of the most authentic figures to ever appear on television. The outpouring was massive, heartfelt, and tinged with the realization that something irreplaceable was shifting. As the dust settles from this shocking announcement, one truth becomes undeniable. Mike Rowe has already secured his place in American history, and his legacy extends far beyond television ratings or foundation scholarships. His real impact lives in the millions of lives he touched, the workers he dignified, and the conversations he forced America to have about the value of labor. Long after today's news fades from headlines, Mike's voice will still echo in classrooms where teachers show Dirty Jobs clips to remind students that every job has worth. It will echo in workshops where young apprentices pick up tools inspired by scholarships that carry his name. It will echo in homes where families gathered around the TV to watch him crawl through sewage with humor and respect, proving that laughter and dignity can coexist even in the dirtiest corners of society. His stepping back doesn't signal an end. It signals a challenge. For years, Mike carried the burden of being the sole mainstream advocate for America's skilled trades. Now his absence forces others, educators, lawmakers, parents, workers themselves, to step up and continue the fight he started. In many ways, this might be his greatest contribution, proving that one man cannot shoulder this mission alone, and that the movement must become bigger than any single voice. Mike promised he won't disappear entirely. His podcast will likely continue, his reflections will surface occasionally, and his humor will find its way into public discourse. But the frenzy, the constant demands, the crushing pressure, those days are over. And perhaps that's the final lesson Mike Rowe offers. Even the strongest among us must know when to rest, when to listen to our bodies, and when to trust that our work has been enough. Fans may mourn the loss of his daily presence, but they'll carry his message forward because it's already become part of them. Mike Rowe spent 2 decades shining a light on America's hidden workforce, and in doing so, he became one of the most trusted voices of his generation. What he announced today, stepping back due to health concerns and emotional exhaustion, marks the end of an era but not the end of his impact. The foundation will continue under new leadership. The scholarships will keep changing lives. The conversations about skilled trades and the dignity of work will go on because Mike planted seeds that have already taken root across the country. His legacy isn't measured in TV episodes or social media followers. It's measured in the electrician who pursued a trade instead of drowning in college debt, the parent who stopped pressuring their kid toward a 4-year degree, and the millions of workers who finally felt seen and valued. Mike showed America that dirty jobs aren't shameful, that hard work isn't obsolete, and that dignity is found in grit, not glamour. Now, as he steps into a quieter chapter to focus on his health, the rest of us carry the responsibility he's laid down. The mission continues. The work goes on, and Mike Rowe's voice, even in silence, will continue to remind us what truly matters.